Okay. All right, I think we'll just give it one more minute just to allow those last few people to enter the room before we get started. Hopefully it'll... Okay, where are we at? Still people entering. Okay. Okay, we've still got people coming in.
You could probably start with intros, Danielle.
All right, we'll get started even though we've got people still coming in. Yep. Okay. So, welcome. Hang on one moment. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. My name is Danielle Hartridge and I'll be your host for today. So Molly and I and our talented group of international students are thrilled that you can join us here today for the launch of the ESOS for Students project, where we will take you on a journey that started last year and up until today, when we will share with you for the first time the resources that we have developed. So just a few housekeeping notes. So everyone's on mute, okay, but please turn on your cameras because we'd love to see all your lovely faces as much as possible. We will be recording this session today for secretariat purposes only, so the recording will not be made available, but obviously you'll have access to all the resources that we're going to share with you. Please ask your questions through the chat function. We will do our best to ask as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Any unanswered questions will be added to the FAQ page on the ISANA website. So to get proceedings started, I would now like to introduce James Borman, who's a Senior Project Manager, International Education at Global Victoria. So, James.
Thanks, Danielle. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Borman, Senior Project Officer at Study Melbourne, and welcome to the final presentation of ESOS for Students. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. The ESOS for Students project, which was developed by Danielle Hartridge in partnership with ISANA and CISA, was proudly funded through Study Melbourne's International Student Welfare Program. The ISWP provides funding for activities that promote the wellbeing and enhance the experience of international students who are studying and living in Victoria. To date, the program has funded 116 projects that support nearly 225,000 international students across a really wide range of topics, including sexual health, sport and the arts, social connectedness, leadership, edutourism, and student empowerment. Under the background of the current COVID crisis, the program also recently supported a further 10 projects through a Stronger Together funding round to address critical and immediate welfare needs for students, including mental health, accommodation, and safety. But today we're here to discuss consumer protection for international students. The Education Services for Overseas Students, or ESOS Act, provides consumer protection for a student visa. However, many international students have limited or no knowledge of the Act itself. For the Act to be successful, students need to know what to do, for example, if their education provider has not met their ESOS obligations, if a student feels unsafe, or if they feel that they're being exploited in their workplace. Understanding that also means a student will know when they're not meeting their own obligations, which could impact their visa conditions. This project was funded back in last year in 2019 and has resulted in a really amazing series of interactive and easy to understand videos and fact sheets, which are designed to protect international students. Some of the topics that you'll hear more about today include deciding where to study, student visas, support services, and understanding your rights as a student. So these are also resources that are going to be really useful both for current students who are already in Victoria or anyone who's considering studying here. Later on, we'll also be hearing about the experiences from some of the international students who participated in this project and how it has benefited them. So I'd like to finish congratulating Bronwyn, Molly, Danielle, and the various student volunteers who've contributed to this project. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the final results. So without further ado, Danielle, back to you, and you'll take us through the presentation.
Thank you, James, and thanks for the support that we've received from Study Melbourne, which is greatly appreciated. So I'm going to just start by giving you a little bit of background and why do something around ESOS for international students. Well, as many of you will know, ISANA has provided online staff training for many, many years, beginning with the 2007 National Code tutorial and recently launched the NCT for the 2018 National Code. So obviously for many, many years, focusing on staff and their need to know about the National Code in order to fulfil their jobs. But while working on the NCT, we thought it would be a great idea to develop a resource to promote awareness of the National Code to international students. The resource for students had to be very different from the NCT developed for staff. I don't think the students would have really engaged well with the NCT, so it had to have a bit of a different focus. And obviously, in order to develop this, student input into the development of the resource was crucial. So we really needed to be guided by the students as to what really they felt were the important messages that need to be delivered and how we could deliver those. So the project seemed to be a good fit for an ISWP, and fortunately ISANA was successful in their application. So basically, just to give you some context of the project and the outline and how we proceeded. So as we know that the ESOS framework provides consumer protection for international students on a student visa, enhances the quality of the student experience and protects the student visa programs. Students have limited or no knowledge of the ESOS framework, and this is evidence with the group of students that we worked with, is that they did have very little knowledge of ESOS or understanding of it, and we're even lucky if they'd actually heard of ESOS. So if it's to be successful in providing protection for the students, then they need to understand the ESOS framework and where to go if the providers have not met their ESOS obligations or if these obligations are not clearly articulated. So through a series of workshops, we worked through, and when I say we, I'm talking about Molly, myself and the students. We worked through each standard to gain a better understanding of what students should expect from their provider. Now, it's quite interesting when we first decided to do this and talked about the idea of working through each standard and having workshops on the National Code. Some people actually thought we were crazy because they said, well, compliance is really boring. Why would students want to know about compliance? And for all my compliance colleagues out there, know that compliance is very interesting, and it was good that most of the students found the sessions that we had interesting as well. So we worked through each of the workshops. We explored the connection of a provider's obligations under the National Code and the international student visa conditions, and we thought that was an important point to highlight. And we'll get to the detail of how we did that later. Then what we did was the students broke into project teams to consider how the information they acquired during the workshops could be communicated effectively to all international students. And then the project teams presented their ideas and provided input on the development of the resources. So these was done as part of what we call the product pitches, which we've recorded, and I will share some information about those shortly. We started by putting out an expression of interest to various students to ask who was interested. We had quite a number of students who put their hand up and said we would like to be involved. So we then had an introductory workshop at Study Melbourne where we invited a number of those students to come along to get a bit of an understanding of what the project was about and to understand the commitment, the level of commitment that would be required, because we really needed students to be engaged in the duration of the project. So initially what we did was we gave an overview of the ESOS legislative framework and where the National Code in particular fitted in. And a really important component of this particular project was thinking about the ESOS, the international student journey. So as we worked through each standards, we were reflecting on at what point of the journey did the students actually need to receive this information. You know, we're looking at inquiry, application, offer, acceptance, pre-departure, that whole arrival, orientation, enrolment, and the ongoing support that students receive. So that was a really important thing that as we worked through each of the workshops, the students were to reflect on what were the key messages and how they might fit into that stage of the student journey and be most relevant at that point in time. Another important component was to think of the channels of communication and how students receive information, because as we know, that can be very wide and varied. So students often get information from websites, through social media, emails, printed material, and at the same time, students, as we were working through each of those workshops, were able to reflect back on how they got information throughout their journey as well, and how that was different and how it's not a one-size-fits-all for all students. We looked at some of the existing awareness campaigns. So as we know, there's been some great work done by people, you know, in the Fair Work Ombudsman and Consumer Affairs Victoria and so forth, and Inner Melbourne Legal Service, who have all done projects around, you know, informing students about their rights. And we wanted to look at some of those projects and how they had worked and maybe see if we could pick up some ideas from some of those campaigns for this particular project. And then finally, we outlined the expectations of the project. So the students had to commit to attending 3 more workshops. They then had to work in groups. So there was group work involved where they had to get together in a group, and then they had to do a product pitch. Their involvement after that was whether or not they had time. So not all students were continued on to the development phase, but we're pleased that a number of the students did. So the first workshop was focusing on the pre-arrival standards. So what we focused on here was, you know, and apologies for those people if I talk about standards too much, but a lot of people will know what I'm talking about. So when we're talking about we talked about the pre-arrival standards. So this was really standards 1 to 4. So this was looking at the marketing and recruitment of students. So looking at things like, you know, in standard 1, where, you know, things having about ethical marketing, not having false or misleading information, ensuring the CRICOS code is on all promotional material. We then went in and looked at standard 2 and all the information that is in the national code that should be made available to students as part of that particular standard. And as we know, there's quite a long list of information that should be made available, and also having the entry requirements was really, really important. And things about RPL, so we worked through that. We then looked at the written agreement, so I had quite a really interesting discussion around the written agreement because, as probably most of you know out there, a lot of the students are not reading the written agreement, and that came through so clearly in the product pictures was around students. This is such an important document, and students really need to take the time to make sure they're reading their written agreement and understanding what's in it. So, for example, there were some students that didn't know that their fees increased each year because they hadn't read the small print. They'd basically just signed the agreement. So it was really interesting to hear their feedback on that. And a really, really interesting discussion around education agents and obviously the important role that they play, but understanding that education agents have to have a written agreement with their education provider and that they have to act in the best interests of the students, that they have to declare conflict of interest and things like that. So we worked through each aspect of the standard 4 and very interesting discussions that we had through that particular standard. And what was really interesting looking at standards 1 to 4, that it's highly likely that a student can actually go through that part, through those 4 standards, without actually having any contact with their education provider, because you think about it, if a student decides, okay, I want to go and study in Australia, they could very well go and find an education agent who gives them all the information, puts in the application, tells the student, there you go, there's your offer, sign it, they've accepted, and then the provider issues the COE. So it might be that that's the first point of contact that the student actually has with their education provider. So that was interesting in reflecting, well, some of the resources that we develop around these pre-arrival standards, the education provider may not be the best person to actually try and get that information out to the students because they might not have actually engaged directly with their provider at that point in time. So then we moved on to workshop 2, where we had student support services and complaint handling. And we were very lucky for this particular workshop. We had Kim and Nuala from TEXA join us for this workshop. So they joined for the entire workshop and engaged in conversations with students around the various standards and particularly talked about their role as a regulator. So here we touched on, as we said, 5, 6 and 10. The students, so for those who don't know, Standard 5 is for students who are under the age of 18. We didn't spend too much time on that. We only had one student who had been an under 18 student at one point, so there wasn't too much of a conversation. We did have a lot of discussion around orientation programs and the kind of information that should be in an orientation program and the importance of attending an orientation program, because so often that we hear from students that they miss their orientation program and they spend all that time trying to catch up. So that was really an interesting discussion. Students reflected on their orientation experience and shared examples of what they felt worked well during an orientation program. We talked about services that should be delivered to students. And the other thing, we had an interesting conversation with our representatives from TEXA about what is to have sufficient number of staff to look after the students and what that might mean. So the students were able to share some of their thoughts on what it might look like to have or not have sufficient staff to support your students as required under Standard 6. We then sort of focused a bit more on sort of the complaint side. So we looked at Standard 10 and how the internal and external complaints and appeals process would work. So students obviously having to go through their internal process, what options are available for their external complaints. TEXA did share with us that they don't actually take complaints from students, so they don't investigate complaints, but they are always interested to hear the students' experiences if they feel that the provider is not meeting their national code obligations, but they can't actually investigate and get back to the student. So they were able to share that information with us. We then finished off with our third workshop. So we've been going really well along the way, and this is sort of when COVID hit, and we had been doing our workshops in Study Melbourne Student Centre, and then all of a sudden COVID hit and we all had to go online. So we had to move our last workshop on Zoom, which was, I think, a first for many of us, and obviously being first, it didn't lead as well to that sort of interactive conversation that we've been really getting into as part of those workshops. But we soldiered on. There's nothing that was going to stop us with this project, and we then proceeded with our third and final workshop, where we looked at providers' responsibility to protect the integrity of the student visa program and international student visa conditions. So really looking at standards 7, 8 and 9 and really, explaining to the students why we have certain obligations under 7, 8 and 9 and things like monitoring course attendance and satisfactory course progress, supporting students who are not meeting course attendance and progress requirements. We talked about transferring to another provider, extending course duration, what was required there. We had a little bit of a chat about what was compassionate or compelling, so the students could get an understanding of, why is it that an international student just can't reduce their study load or just can't take intermission like a domestic student? Why is that different? And how compassionate or compelling might be interpreted differently depending on the education provider. We then looked at how the providers notify immigration of course variations through PRISMs and doing variations to the COE and how that worked. And ultimately, really, you need to maintain your COE. So if you don't have an enrolment, you don't have a COE. Of course, we don't talk about visas, but obviously the connection with the COE and the student visa was really important to highlight. So then the students had a bit of a break to get into their project groups and work on their product pictures. So there was so much going on at this time. The students had moved to online study. We were all working differently. There was a lot of things that were going on and a lot of changes that had to be made. And Molly and I were fully expecting that the students probably would need more time to deliver their product pictures. But they didn't. They soldiered on as per the date required and proceeded to give their product pictures. So we were lucky to have a few of our stakeholders present when they presented their ideas. And the idea was that taking on what they had learnt through the workshops is what were those important messages that we needed to then communicate to students, and at what stage of that student journey should they be communicated, and what were going to be the most effective platforms for communication with the students. So we had our product pictures, which we did via Zoom, and we were just blown away. The results far exceeded our expectation. Not only did the project groups deliver on the brief, but they exceeded. They actually identified good practice in a number of the standards of what they thought. And Faisal, who you will hear from shortly, I think is basically got a whole presentation there in itself on how to revolutionise how we manage agents, really looking at it from a student perspective and so forth. So that was really, really interesting. And at that time, it also enabled us to reflect on what was happening with COVID-19 and the standards, which was a really interesting conversation because we, as we were moving this, we'd all moved online, and that, we knew that online learning wasn't generally allowed, and now we were all fully online. So that was interesting, and knowing that providers still required to support the students while they're studying online. And Radhika, one of our students who gave a presentation, had actually indicated to everyone that during her pitch that we all needed to have a force majeure in our written agreement. So I don't know. I didn't know what a force majeure was at that time, but that's something that was interesting to think about, that we should have a clause in our written agreement that focuses just on that. So we then had the product pictures, and so some of the results that came through from that was really what they felt was really, really, really important was highlighting the importance of being independent, not relying on others, and for students to do their own research and check the information being provided. The transparency between provider, agent and student, documenting all the communications that the students have. Students indicated that websites and written agreements were really hard to navigate, so that students really needed some guidance on perhaps what to look for and so forth. Breaking down the main concepts into simple to understand language, and compare, one suggestion was that we should have a platform to rank providers and agents, working with students and clubs and societies to get the information out there, getting more feedback from students, and then some of the ideas about how we might be able to get the messages out there was around, competitive games and quizzes with certificates of completion, encourage students to vlog, webinars in the early stages of decision making. Some of the students were really felt it was really important for the education providers to really try and a little bit more to engage with students in those earlier standards and not rely so much on agents. Posters, it was suggested we should have some posters, some videos. There was suggestions of e-modules, quizzes and games, and obviously also translating some of that material. So we were left then with a whole lot of ideas, which we indicated at the time we weren't going to be able to do all of them. So we really had to sort of focus on what we felt we could do. And then what we decided was that we would work on 2 posters, and I'll take you through those 2 posters. We would work on 6 fact sheets and 5 videos. So what we're going to do now is to take you through those resources which are on the website. And this is our poster 1. So Shanaz will remember presenting this idea at her product pitch and said we really needed to have a poster that was put up that students could see, that just drew their attention to the fact that, if you're planning for study in Australia, that you really need to know your rights and responsibilities as an international student. And the idea of this is to draw the students to the resources that have been developed on the ISANA, that are on the ISANA website. So this was a very high-level poster that could be put up in education agents' offices that really encouraged that students to take that ownership for, you know, looking for their own information, not relying on others, but going out there and finding that information and doing their research. Our second poster, and this is what we call the ESOS Journey for International Students. So what this poster does is it actually takes the students through the journey of, you know, the very beginning of deciding where to study, you know, things about education agents, application to study, you know, really emphasising key points throughout each stage. So, for example, with application to study, you're saying to students, well, you know, do your research and only submit the application when you've done all your research. You know, only accept your written agreement when, you know, or the offer, depending on what you call it, once you've actually read it and understood it, and really trying to emphasise that was really important. You know, we touch on under 18, and then obviously with the confirmation of enrolment, once the students accept, basically that's the evidence of their enrolment. So that sort of is what they use to obviously get their student visa. Then with their student visa, with their student visa comes certain responsibilities with the student visa, looking at the importance of pre-departure, and then once students arrive, the arrival and orientation, what to look for, the support services, and then maintaining their enrolment. Then you'll see at the bottom here we've got links to various organisations that protect the rights of international students, that promote and protect the rights. So we've got links to, this is available, and you'll see this on the website shortly, but this is actually available, and all these link to the various relevant sections of those websites that provide more information to students. So as we said before, you know, we know that the Commonwealth Ombudsman has produced some really great resources for international students. So that link will actually take the students through to those resources, as does the Fair Work Ombudsman, things around Australian consumer law, Australian Human Rights Commission, and so forth. So I just want to mention at this stage that obviously we know, thank you to Study Melbourne for funding the project, so most of the resources apply equally regardless of the state where the student is located, but you will find that with a couple of the resources there are specific mentions to Victoria and groups within Victoria, but they basically, for most of the part, it would apply equally to students regardless of where they study. And yeah, so now what we're going to do is just highlight, these are the 6 fact sheets. So deciding where to study, the written agreement, international students under the age of 18, support services, student visa conditions, your rights as an international student. So 5 of those also have videos. We didn't do a video on under 18. Maybe that's something we can do at another time, but we didn't do a video on under 18. So I am now going to go straight to the website and share with you the contents of the website and link on to some of those resources that we have. Okay, so just bear with me while I bring up the website. Sorry, I thought I had this. Hang on one moment, I just have opened the website page, so I just need to get that up and then share that with you. There it is. And then share screen. There it is. Okay, so what I'll do is take you through the website. So this is what the front page looks like as you log on. We'll come back to this top section here, International Students' Rights. What we'll do is we'll just move down to the journey map that I showed you and show you how all the resources link from the journey map. So this, and I've got to add that all of these resources, both the posters, the fact sheets and the videos, have all been translated into Chinese as well. So here, if you click on ESOS Journey, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to download the PDF of the ESOS Journey for International Students poster. So that's what you're looking at now, and then also looking at the Chinese version. So you can also see that there's a Chinese version of that poster as well that you'll be able to download and use. So it's all been translated. We will then show you the, so each part of this links on a certain stage of the journey that links to certain standards. So this one here, where we've put together deciding where to study, education agents and application to study, if you link on that, what you'll find is that we have all of the fact sheets in English, the fact sheet in Chinese, and then we have a video in English, a video with Chinese subtitles, and a video with English subtitles as well, so if you want to use that. So if we navigate through, what you'll see is that each stage of this journey, so we click on the written agreement and accept your offer, we'll take you through to that those particular fact sheets that we've developed there. So that's a fact sheet about the written agreement, and really emphasising to students to really highlight the importance of reading through that information themselves. So just to give you an idea of what one of the fact sheets looks like, and I'm going to use this one because we've got two of our fact sheets that actually have checklists. So this is in each of the fact sheets we've taken some of the important points that the students raised during their product pitches, and we've highlighted those as what we call light bulb moments for the students to really take note. So this is around taking the time to read the agreement. You know, if there's something you do not understand, ask your education agent or education provider to explain. There may be information in the agreement that will affect you later, and you need to be aware of the consequences. Only accept the written agreement after you have read and understood it. So it really, and what I'll once again emphasise, this is really picking up on what's in the National Code. You know, and as we know, the National Code provides a set of minimum standards. So we're not, we're just sort of picking up on what information is in the code that needs to be communicated to students. And this is a bit of a checklist. So this was another thing that came up in our product pitches, where students felt that if they could have a checklist of things to look out for and guide them through what to look for in the written agreement. So this is something where a student could download and potentially sort of make some notes. So this is all the information that we're required to provide in written agreements. So they could actually make a few notes. They could also compare different institutions' written agreements if they happen to get multiple offers at the same time. But this was to draw their attention to what they might need to look out for. So there is also one on under 18 students. So just it tells the students about the different welfare arrangements that the student might be looking for, whether that's and what has to happen if a CORE is going to be issued. These particular components of the journey do not have fact sheets here. They didn't sort of warrant a standalone fact sheet, but they were important enough to highlight as important components, because obviously, you know, as we know, once the students accepted their offer, they get the confirmation of enrolment and the student visa, then they're very much that sort of links down later to maintaining their enrolment. So that's really important. And although pre-departure is not mentioned in the National Code, we all know that that's a really important stage of the journey. Then we click on here to, once again, the next stage. So we've got some arrival and orientation. So we know about the information to be provided through orientation program. And once again, we've also, what I might do is open up this in Chinese. Not that most of you will be able to read it, but it just gives you an example of what one of the fact sheets looks like in Chinese, and now this particular fact sheet also has a checklist in it as well. So this is what is outlined in Standard 6 as the information that students should get as part of their orientation program. So this will guide the students, you know, to maybe make some notes about what's required, not only in the orientation program, but making sure they know who is their dedicated support person that they can contact, you know, the health, the safety information, all of that information that they can make some notes of in their fact sheet. And then the last one is around maintaining their enrolment. So that one is again is an interactive video, which we're going to show you. We're actually going to show you all the videos, but that has a supporting fact sheet as well. And as mentioned, every area at the bottom here links through to the relevant page of the those organisations' websites, and obviously all the rich information that's available through those websites and all the other resources that have developed for students. And we thought this was really important because obviously there's a lot of good information out there, but there wasn't really one place you could go to get all of that information. So we felt that that was really important. And we now have, and up here is international students' rights. So this picks up on particularly Standard 10, but generally more broadly about students' rights. So we're going to sort of look at that video as well as the posters that we have. So we have that poster, which is that high-level poster that you saw earlier on, drawing the students to the attention that they have rights and responsibilities, and to encourage them to look a little bit more into that. So what we're going to do now is actually take you through the videos, and we're going to do our first 2 videos, and then we're going to hear from one of our students before we take you through the next 3 videos. And I'll just show them to you in English. They will have that the Chinese subtitles as well. So here we are. Here's and through the development of the videos, we were actually given some different ideas of how videos can be done, sort of animation, interview style, interactive. So what we did at the time, we shared those ideas with the students, and we asked them to give us feedback as to which particular video would suit which particular group of standards the best. So, and we took on board their feedback. It was a very democratic process. They went out, students, they all voted on what they thought, and we went with the majority. So here's our first video.
Lumi wants to study in Australia. Her friend Fairsil is already studying in Australia, so Lumi calls him for advice. Help me, Fairsil.
Sure thing, Lumi. Make sure your provider is on the CRICOS list. The provider cannot ensure that you will be granted migration into Australia. So if the agent tells you that, something is not right. The way they promote a course must be consistent with Australian consumer law. So check that out. If a claim does not sound right, ask for verification. Find out the entry requirements for the course you want to do. Make sure you understand things like course details and duration, what is on campus, fees and payment policies, living costs, recognition of prior learning, and what might cause an overseas student's enrolment to be deferred, suspended, or cancelled. What about education agents? Glad you asked. Providers have to have a written agreement with any agent who represents them. If you are looking into a provider, check their website for a list of agents they work with. Agents earn commissions from providers, but still ask if there will be any costs to you. You should expect agents to provide accurate information and act in your best interests. And they are not allowed to give migration advice unless they are a registered migration agent.
Thanks, Fairsil.
Asking for advice is great, but it is also essential to do your own research and do it well in advance. That way you can make the most informed decision.
Okay, so that was the first video. Now, I'm sure you can appreciate how hard it is to get such a vast amount of information into a 2-minute video. It was very hard to get that information. So I know that that not everything in the standards are covered in the video, but we're hoping that the important points that the students thought needed to be mentioned are highlighted in the video. So now we're going to go into the next video, which is the part about the written agreement.
Guess what? Lumi finally got a letter of offer from her preferred education provider. It is a long letter. She does not read it all. She just cannot wait to pay her deposit and get her confirmation of enrolment. Fortunately, her friend Fairsil calls with some much-needed words of wisdom.
Congratulations, Lumi. But there are some important things you need to know. First, do not just agree to anything. Read your letter carefully and ask your provider or agent to help explain anything you do not understand. Before you hand over your money, you need to know what you are signing up for. Make sure your written agreement contains all the right information. There is a lot in there, so check the information against what you applied for. Do not sign anything unless you are sure that what is in the agreement meets your needs exactly. Keep copies of your agreement and receipts. If a written agreement contains links to other material, keep digital copies too. If your provider is not delivering the course outlined in your written agreement, the Tuition Protection Service is around to help students find alternative courses or get refunds if needed.
Thanks, Faisal.
Remember, when you are in Australia, you have to give your education provider your address, mobile number, email address, and emergency contact. If any of these change, you need to advise your provider within 7 days.
Excellent.
Congrats again, Lumi. Great work.
Okay, so that's our first two videos. I'm going to stop sharing the screen at the moment, and we're going to introduce one of our students, Mohammed Faisal, who is going to share his experience about working on the project. So over to you, Mohammed. Faisal.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for your kind remarks and compliments. I highly appreciate it. And thank you very much for providing me and other international students with this opportunity to share our experience. And I'm really grateful to all of you, to the whole entire team of ISANA and Study Melbourne, who have hosted us for 2 weeks. And also I would like to congratulate you on their brilliant effort throughout this, 6 months or so, maybe more than that. So, as far as my experience is concerned, I joined this program having absolutely no knowledge and interest in these educational standards. I did not have any idea even if there is any such thing like standards out there, particularly educational standards. So therefore, once we get into these sessions, we realize that there is definitely a need for international students for effective communication and work together to pitch our ideas. And ISANA work hard to bring those ideas into reality, as you've seen into a couple of videos and the fact sheets. So the purpose was this because as an international student, yes, there was a lack of effective, we felt there is a need for rather more effective communication, and through these resources, students would be better equipped in their decision making at different stages of their student life cycle. So throughout this journey, it was very professional, and we were all supported even during COVID time once we have to move online. So once again, thank you very much. So the best part of this project was, I think, that even the research team and ISANA members, they were all exceptionally have a good grasp on these matters of this international students. Despite that, they also invited international students to participate in this research and directly listen to one of the stakeholders, such as international students. So we had a very diverse group from different universities in different programs and different countries even as well, to obtain majority of the viewpoints from the students' perspective, which I think is less heard of when it comes to developing these kind of resources. So in my understanding, I think due to the whole impact, I think it was more, the thing which stood out for me, I think it was belonging. As in many instances, I think the international students, when they initially at least arrive in Australia, they like to move in their own communities and live in their silos and having a less interaction with domestic students. So for me, despite, instead of spending almost 3 years or so when joining this project, I felt like having a feeling of belonging while participating in this project and supporting other international students. I also hold one of the leadership positions in the club at RMIT University. So through this knowledge, now I'm more equipped and capable of extending my help and support to other students. So I would say this was one of the great initiatives and absolutely one of the best experience that I have had in last 3 years or so. So I learned a lot from this program, and before I conclude, I once again like to thanks on behalf of all the international students, particularly those who participated in this program, to provide us with this opportunity and share our insights. And I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And as I said earlier, Faisal gave an incredible presentation on agents, and I'm hoping that at some point perhaps through a conference or something in the future, we will be able to hear that presentation, or other people, I heard it, but maybe other people will be able to hear that presentation. Okay, so the next video that we're going to look at is what we call video. Everything had numbers. This was video 3. This is around the support services. And what you'll see, this one looks a bit different. Now, I just want to add at this point in time, we did our best to try and incorporate all of our students in the videos in one way or another. It didn't quite work out that way, mostly due to Monash having their exams during the time we were doing filming. So there's a couple of students we would have really liked to have had involved, but they're given clashes of some things that were happening that we didn't get there as much as what we would like. So, but we did our best, and that was our intention, to have all students represented in the videos. So this is an interview style video. So this is to get across and just appreciate this. We had almost, I think, 3 hours of footage to cut down into a 2-hour video to get across the important points relating to Standard 6.
My orientation experience was actually really nice.
In the orientation, we got to hear all the roles and responsibilities of each department.
We were given all the information that we needed, from security to how we contact the student learning advisors and everything that we needed.
You get to meet different students, you get to meet different teachers, you get to know what the university is about, the services that are available in the universities, from using a MyKey to what the regulations are at the beach.
So during my study, I had sought help from both inside of my education institution and outside of my university.
The support services are free since for the national code, it is obligated for educational providers to give it to students,
which include counseling services on campus, library services, the academic support services.
I accessed student support by first attending orientation, and during orientation they told us that student support was for everybody.
The support information was quite easy to find. I just had to hop onto the university website and look for the relevant information. About safety, I felt quite safe in Melbourne throughout my 2 years living and studying here. Some of the support that I've received around staying safe has been from campaigns around the university, so seeing posters and ads, and also the apps that are available on your mobile device where you can simply press a button to access university help. I'm also aware of the emergency services that were told to me very early on from my arrival.
Stay strong, that's all you need, but you need to be prepared of what are the challenges.
Don't be afraid of asking for help. Don't be afraid to say yes to any opportunity that you're not comfortable with.
And make sure you try to volunteer, because the feeling that you get when you give back is priceless.
Okay, so that was a video 3 highlighting the importance of orientation and then the support services. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go into another type of video. This is an interactive, and this is a little bit different, because what's going to happen here is when we click on this interactive video, it's actually going to take us into Moodle, ISANA's Moodle account. So we'll just have to quickly log on there. So for those of you who don't know, this is where the National Code tutorial is, so you might be interested in doing that as well. You won't have access to that though, because I'm entering through my login. So this is the interactive video around student visa conditions. So this is how you enter it. So I just wanted to take you through those steps to show how you enter that particular video. It's now loading. We click start.
When an international student accepts an offer to study, they will receive a confirmation of enrollment, or COE.
This COE is evidence of your enrollment, which you need to apply for a student visa. Your student visa has certain conditions attached. Check visa entitlement verification online to find out more.
If you stop being enrolled, or if your enrollment is cancelled, your education provider has to cancel your COE.
Your education provider must monitor your course progress, enrollment, course duration, and attendance. They may suspend, defer, or extend your enrollment if you have compelling or compassionate circumstances. They must put in place an intervention strategy if you are at risk of not meeting your course progress requirements.
Compassionate or compelling circumstances are beyond the student's control and the impact on the student's progress or well-being. This may include medical health problems that prevent students from attending class or the impact on their mental health.
This is Naz. She is not making satisfactory academic progress, so her education provider sends her an intervention strategy and outlines the support that is available to her.
I think Naz should act on it. The support is there and she should access it, and this will help improve her performance.
I think she should just ignore it. Things will work out in the end. What do you think?
So, of course, we're going to act on it.
Correct. By taking advantage of the support available, Naz can improve her performance and proceed with her course.
Okay.
What about Chow? Chow has a medical problem and he has stopped attending classes. I guess it's okay. He's not well. He shouldn't be required to attend classes.
Actually, I think he should see a medical practitioner. They may be able to provide a letter as evidence of compelling or compassionate circumstances. Chow might be able to receive an approved suspension from study. Great! Now Chow can take the time he needs to recover.
And then there's Walid. Walid is having a rough time.
Walid is just 4 subjects away from completing his course. His COE finishes at the end of the study period.
But his father just passed away. Now he's struggling to cope with full-time study load. What should he do?
That's easy. He should just withdraw from 2 subjects and reduce his study load.
Not so fast. I suggest he seek out a medical professional who may provide evidence of compelling or compassionate circumstances. Good work, Walid. Now you have an extension and you can complete your course at a comfortable pace. And we're truly sorry for your loss.
As you can see, your education provider will make a range of support services available for you.
When in doubt, seek it out because you wouldn't want to have visa troubles.
Thanks for watching. For more information, contact your education provider.
Okay, so that was the interactive video, and I realised that each provider will have their own way of managing those things, so that's why we've highlighted to students that they really need to contact their education provider. Now we're going to go into our last, I'm hoping we're taking a bit longer than I hope, so I hope you can just stay for a few minutes after 1 o'clock so we can finish off. We're now going to go into our final video, which is around international students' rights, and this was one of back to the animation style video that we have.
Meet Radhika. Radhika is an international student doing her PhD in law. International students are responsible for meeting their visa conditions and following Australian laws. Many laws protect international students during their time in Australia, and most of them apply equally to Australian citizens, residents, and other visa holders. The Education Services for Overseas Students legislation protects international students in Australia. Education providers must have an internal complaints handling and appeals process that can be accessed by international students. Radhika's tip: Check the website of your education provider to find out about its internal complaints and appeals policy. If you are unable to resolve your complaint or appeal through your provider's internal process, you have a right to access an external complaint and appeals process.
Radhika's tip.
If you need help, seek it out quickly. Don't wait for things to get worse. If you aren't able to express yourself in English, you can seek help from a support person while presenting your case. Make use of the counselling services offered by your provider, as well as external organisations, to ensure you can manage stress that may result from problems or conflict. The regulators, ASQA and TEXA, can investigate and take action against providers for breaches of the ESOS Act and the National Code. International students can access legal services. There are community legal services which support international students on a range of issues.
Thanks, Radhika. For more information, see our website.
Okay, so that's all our videos, and now we're going to hear from Radhika herself about her experience working on this project. So over to you, Radhika.
Thank you, Daniel. When I first registered for the workshops on the ESOS Act, little did I know that they would be more than mere educative sessions. In the past 6 months, not only have I become knowledgeable about all the standards under the National Code, but also got the opportunity to work with very creative and passionate people, have my own professional photo shoot, and even be a character in the video, as you just saw. And as a PhD student, I can vouch for the fact that research is a very solitary endeavor. So the ESOS for Students project was a welcome change where I got to experience peer learning through my interaction with other students. I got to know so much more about the way things work in other universities just by listening to other students talk about their orientation experience, interaction with education agents, etc., when they were applying to universities. Moreover, I thoroughly enjoyed working on the group presentations as part of groups 1 and 2, where despite being from different backgrounds, we all could work very well collectively together as a team to ensure that our presentation went well. Thanks to my experience, I feel a lot more empowered and confident today about standing up for my rights. And on a personal front, I felt very inspired by the ease and passion with which Molly and Daniel have led the project and ensured that we all had a very enjoyable experience. I feel very, very fortunate to have known such wonderful people. So I'd like to thank Daniel, Molly, ISANA, and all the participants in this project for such an extremely valuable and memorable experience for me. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Radhika. It was great working with you too. I mean, Radhika came in with so much passion. I think it was after the second workshop and we talked about the cost of living, Radhika decided to go and do her own research and actually look at, not the cost of living, the tuition fees, and look at how tuition fee increased at different providers over time, which was really interesting, and compare that and what information was available. So which was really exciting. So we're just nearly there at the end. So what we're going to do now is just, so we've been through the website, you've seen the resources, you've heard from our two students. So what now? Well, we need to be more proactive in pushing out these resources, and of course we would love for you all to use these resources, you know, to have the links from your websites to push them out there. But we're not going to be relying just on you. We've actually created our own Facebook, Instagram and WeChat accounts, which are called ESOS for Students, and the links are available from the ISANA website. So we would like to encourage you to join our groups, because we will be pushing key messages out as well as these resources. And we've also got some other video footage that we'll be pushing out as well. So really this is only the beginning. You've seen the resources. Now we hope to see them, you'll see them through various social media outlets, because for this project to be really, to be truly successful, we need these resources to be out there. We need the students to be seeing them, and we need them to take note and to listen to the messages that are going through. So, you know, because really we believe that if students take on board some of these important messages and are, you know, particularly in those earlier standards, and really take on board some of those suggestions, do their research, do their homework, read their written agreement, and are more informed, and hopefully that will lead to a better experience that they will have when they come and study here. So we're going to finish off now by thanking our amazing, talented and dedicated students. There's nothing I like more than working with a group of international students because they continue to inspire me day after day. So here are our project teams that work together, who attended all the workshops and contributed so much. So we've heard from Radhika and Mohammed, Shanaz, Chow, Millie, Lumi, Sean, Zokret, Sal and Yuchin were our students who worked very hard on all of these projects.
Like that. We just have to walk slowly.
And the institutions where these students came from were Melbourne University, RMIT, Monash, Deakin and VU. And we would also like to thank our students who helped with the videos, Ratika, Sahil, Don and Wendy, who were able to join us and help with the videos as you saw them. We would also like to thank the following people for the product development. So Steve at Creativa for the video production, with a special thanks to Monash College. Somehow we managed in all this craziness to find a time when we could actually go and do a video shoot, and we were very lucky that Monash College gave us a venue for that.
In mind, we're past 1 o'clock, but thank you to everyone who could stay on. And I think, as I am, and after seeing that presentation, you must be all feeling very excited about this project, especially seeing all the work that has been put into it and the end result. This project was only made possible through the contribution from many people, including those mentioned from the project reference group and the project development teams of Creativia, conference design and bridging translation. And of course, as with all projects, you need to have those who will drive it. So firstly, I want to extend a huge thank you to Study Melbourne, the International Student Welfare Program, which is a Victorian government initiative. ISANA has been granted several funding opportunities over the past few years, and we have been very fortunate to have program managers who are flexible and supportive. And for this particular project, I want to sincerely thank James Borman for all his encouragement and support. Secondly, when the call was put out for student volunteers to join our project, were overwhelmed by the response and the calibre of the applicants. You will have seen from Faisal and Radhika's presentation the energy, insight and enthusiasm our student volunteers brought to this project, based on government legislation no less. It was absolutely amazing. And lastly, and most crucially, I would like to thank Danielle Hartridge and Molly Bonifan, who formed the core project team. It was Danielle who pitched this project to ISANA and drove its development during the most challenging of times. And Molly, you kept us all on track with the timeline, financials, and importantly, your enthusiasm levels, 3 o'clock in the morning. We all know Danielle works crazy hours. So I know how many hours you both put in and spent on this project, so thank you both so much. We've captured the questions that have come up in the Zoom chat group. I'm sorry we don't have time to go through them all, but I would again like to thank everyone for tuning in. Please go to the website, have a look at everything, send us any more questions you may have and we'll do our best to answer you. And thank you everyone so much for participating and being there for ISANA. Thank you all so much. Goodbye.